Episode 25 with Jane Piper.
Here we go.
If you want a podcast, you can listen to at work. Don't listen to a podcast made by a jerk. Take a listen to this instead. I'm sure you'll have a blast. The worst thing that can happen is you'll get a little gas. The Humplik Happy Hour Podcast. The Humplik Happy Hour Podcast. The Humplik Happy Hour Podcast. The Humplik Happy Hour Podcast.
I'm going to give you a heads up too. We're recording this on Sunday morning, and last night I drank like this really cheap Argentinian Shiraz. So basically, yeah, my brain is being fueled by the remnants of like the nitrates. So
all right,
I've got a black coffee in front of me, and you'll have to bear with me. One of the big reasons I wanted you on the show is because I have a regular guest, Michael Spratt, who's a local criminal lawyer. And he's really insightful with like legal stories and what's going on in the law. And we often discuss, like cases and those type of things. But he never covers the victim's point of view.
right.
Really, it's more like the judicial system and how it works. And he kind of, I'm a moron basically. So he spells it out to me how it works. And hopefully it's a bit of a learning experience for the people who listen as well.
Right.
And so I thought...
Is he Canadian or American? Sorry.
He's Canadian here in Ottawa.
Okay.
And he comes over to my house and we'll talk.
Okay.
But what I'll do is I'll pull together stories from Canadian events and American events, and we'll talk about them. But we never really cover the victim side, and I thought your story is pretty crazy, and you're willing to do this with me to have a discussion about it today. And by the way, my guest today, Jane Piper, and we've known each other for a long time. And I thought it'd be great to have you on to talk about it. And maybe people can learn from this as well. You're the victim of a pretty serious crime and also survivor of it. And I thought, maybe you can just, Jane, I'll be honest, like, it's weird actually for me to be asking these things. And,
right.
and so I'm going to, maybe you can share the story and we can go from there.
So I worked as a personal assistant in Hollywood for a TV producer and director and writer. And I was doing the grocery shopping at Ralph's in Brentwood, and which is right on Wilshire for anyone who knows LA. It's like right down the street from where O.J. Simpson allegedly killed his wife.
It's a pretty affluent neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. And it's right on, it's surrounded by office buildings, and it's a residential area sort of, but the store is on Wilshire, which is all office buildings and businesses. So it's, not an area you would think something like this could happen. And it was broad daylight in the middle of this, in the middle of summer in August. And, in 3:30 in the afternoon. Anyway, I had done some shopping for my boss and I was in a rush because I had to go pick up his kids at their science camp down the street. And I got into the car and I drove a Suburban, which was their car, but it was basically mine for work.
Okay.
So it's a big car. And so I got in the car, and because it's this, you have to step up, and and I had some stuff in my hand, so I put all my stuff on the passenger seat, and then the door was still open, so I turned to close the door, and when I turned, there was a guy standing in the door, and he basically in like a split second shoved his way in, like kind of pushed himself into the driver's seat. And closed the door and locked it.
This was in the middle of the afternoon?
Yeah, it was at I think it was 3:30 in the afternoon.
God. So were there tinted windows on the thing, or?
Well, there's tinted windows in the back, and that's why I always assume that no one saw what was going on.
Okay.
But I also have always worried that people may have seen what was going on and just chose not to do anything.
Okay. Were there people?
I'll never know. I will never.
Were there people walking by while this was?
Yeah, the person who was parked right next to me, in the middle of in the middle of him beating the crap out of me, I remember hearing the car go away, because when I was being raped, I actually was. I mean, I can go into more detail of how it all happened if you want, but I had my hands against the window in the back, and I remember like trying to write with my finger on the window. Like, I don't know if I wrote help or if I just was like motioning so people would see my hand moving around and think, oh, well, that's weird. What's going on in there? Mm-hmm. But, like you would, like as if it were a snowy day, you could write in the frost, but it was the middle of August, and I don't know. It was just, when that's happening, things go through your head of like ways you can try and like communicate with the outside world and get help. So I did a lot of weird things in that.
So, how long did this last?
It was about.
By the way, if I'm asking questions that are completely inappropriate, it's just because I'm a moron. I don't know what I'm doing.
If something is inappropriate, I'll tell you, and I probably
okay, please do.
But honestly, I'm pretty free about talk. I don't mind talking about anything. I think it's important that people talk about this stuff. I think that the details of this, of the pain and the torture and violence of it are not spoken about enough, so it protects it. That's why I feel like it's important that I talk about the brutality of it, because that's exactly what it is. It's disgusting. But at the same time, I'm alive, so, and I'm able to. So that's, I feel like that I should, because I can.
So just to put some context in this, you were how old at the time?
Oh gosh, I was
late 20s. So okay, now
you're gonna date me.
No, okay, but we don't.
Let's just say I was in. Oh man, now you're making all of my insecurity.
No, Jane, I'm sorry.
I can talk about being raped all day long, but
okay.
ask me how old I am.
Yeah,
it's going to be public. Now I'm horrified.
Okay,
let's just say I was somewhere in between my mid-20s to early 30s.
Gotcha.
Or something around there.
Enough said. We don't need to handle this. And I mean, I know you, and you're petite as well.
Petite? Well,
I mean,
I was.
You're not a 6'2" woman as well. Like,
yeah, well, I'm 5'8". I was skinny,
Yeah.
I guess.
And he was a.
I'm not a linebacker.
No, okay. The event happened.
I think it's irrelevant to yourself.
Yeah, I know. You know what? Thinking about it now, I kind of regret having asked that. Yeah.
If you're a really strong person, I suppose you have a better chance of physically defending yourself and getting away. But because of the situation, do you want me to go back? We're kind of back because the method. I mean, I can basically say the guy eventually forced me into the very back seat of the Suburban. And he had what I thought was a knife in the beginning. It was a corkscrew, and he stuck it against my side immediately when he got in the car. Okay. So I thought that I was like a millimeter away from being stabbed.
Wow.
Did you like how I just said a millimeter?
That's good. Yeah, I can imagine that things go so quickly that.
Yeah. It's weird, and there are a couple things. Well, one in particular, like when I did escape eventually, I don't really remember how it happened, because I don't know if I landed on my head or if it was just it was such a panicked and liberating moment all in the same time that your memory doesn't work properly.
But okay, sorry. I was going to ask you, how did you escape from this?
Well, I eventually, he forced me into the back seat. When I realized what he was doing, at first I was very confused. It's weird how the brain processes when you're in that in that kind of situation, because at first I remember starting to sort of cry to myself when he got into the car, because on a cellular level I knew this was very wrong, obviously, but initially he was just asking for a ride. So it's like he was saying one thing, but he was doing another. He was asking for a ride, but pushing me into the back seat. And I was like, well, how can I give you a ride if I'm in the back seat? Because I was still trying to logistically understand what, and figure out, logically understand what was happening. And there was no way, because there was no logic to it. And everything he was saying, like, he didn't immediately say, this is what I'm going to do to you. He, said something else, kept telling me he wasn't going to hurt me. But then it hurt me.
I imagine as a man, had that happened to me, I would have thought instantly that I was being robbed. Or he was.
No, you know what? That's funny. I never once. That's so interesting. I don't think anyone's ever said that to me. He did look for stuff at the end, but never once in those moments did I actually think, you know what? Never did those thoughts go through my mind that he wanted something. I always felt it. Again, it's not.
But this is the male mind versus the female mind, right? Like, that's how a man would think, because I've never once in my life felt like I was going to be raped while walking down the street. And I'm 47 years old. You know what I mean?
No. Well, I didn't think I was going to be raped either. I was just physically in fear.
Okay.
It wasn't, honestly, I had no idea. It didn't even occur to me that that's what was going to happen. I think like I said, on a cellular level, I knew that I was about to be very badly hurt. And I think that's why I was going through the reactions that I was, and trying to get, bargain with him to, like, oh, well, if you want me to drive you, I've got to be in the passenger seat. How can I drive from back here? And trying to and he's just like, well, I don't care about the drive, lady. He didn't say that, obviously, but that's what was, and eventually when he pushed me into the very back seat, and at that point I was like, I don't understand why. And then he said, take your clothes off. And then I just leapt back, practically on top of him, because there's no doors in the back, and this is suburban, right? There's 2 rows of seats behind the driver and passenger seats. So there's 2 bench seats, and then there's the very back, trunk area. And he had pushed me into the second back seat, and then told me take my clothes off. And at that point I realized, oh shit, can I swear on this thing?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Okay. Then then at that point I realized, like, oh my, this is not happening. And I just jumped back into the seat where he was, jumped on top of him pretty much, and started fighting with him. Got the screwdriver out, or the corkscrew out of his hand, and started hitting him with it. But this is the weird thing too, is that I'm not a violent person. And I took a self-defense class afterwards, and it's sort of to get you into a different frame of mind, because often I think some people are naturally violent and they will have that fight mechanism immediately in them. Mm-hmm. That wasn't me, because even though at that point he had told me to take my clothes off, I knew he had horrible intentions, but there was something physical in me that prevented me from hurting him. Like, I could have poked him in the eye with the thing, or at least done damage. But I remember hitting him with the corkscrew, but knowing, oh God, knowing I couldn't hit too hard because I might break skin, and I couldn't have that happen.
Wow. So even as you're being attacked, let me ask you this. There's always an argument by gun lobbyists that, how many rapes or murders could owning a gun, how many crimes could that stop? If you had a gun at the time, do you think you could have used it?
No. That's the most asinine thing. I hate that.
Yeah, so do I, but I felt like I had to ask it.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think but it's also, this is the thing, is that people think that a gun protects you. There's way more to just carrying a gun. You have to have a lifetime of behavior and consciousness about the fact that you have a gun. You have to have it in the exact place in the car that at the moment that you have your senses back. I mean, if there had been a gun in the back seat, exactly where I could have reached without him seeing or knowing while he was raping me, then maybe I could have. That's the only moment, because that's when I left my body and started thinking about escape. Mm-hmm. But when you're being physically held against your will, unless you have the gun in your hand at that moment. I mean, I'm a woman. I had just put my purse down. Chances are the gun would have been in my purse. So, and I never got that purse back. I didn't get that purse back until the police recovered the car later, which is another later part of the story. But it's ridiculous. I mean, if you had a gun in a holster even, I think that you're in more danger, because if you're being physically overtaken and the person discovers you have a gun, then you're more likely to have that gun used on you. That guy did not have a gun when he was attacking me, but at one point I had the car. This is the thing. I had the keys to the vehicle in my hand for the first, I don't know how much of the struggle that we, the whole time we were together. I could have pressed the button on the alarm at any moment. And it probably scared him enough that he would have run away, or at least drawn attention. But my mind I wasn't even aware the keys were in my hand anymore, because my hand was just, it wasn't relevant. There's something that goes on in your body when you're in that sort of defensive mode, that unless you have years of practice in that mode, like you're in the military or a police officer, or you've had some kind of training, you cannot know that you would have the psychological makeup that would allow you to actually rationally protect yourself. Okay. And the one person that is in control, at least in the beginning in that scenario, is the perpetrator. And if you've got more weapons for him to use, he's just going to use them against you more often than not, I would imagine. The man was when he realized that I had the keys in my hand the whole time, in a split second, he realized that I could have stopped it, and he beat me some more. He beat me harder when he found the keys, and that was when he took them. And those were keys, that wasn't a gun. So I can only imagine if I'd had a gun, he would have for sure, beat the crap out of me with it. Maybe, and maybe shot me as well. Who knows? But yeah, I am very much against that argument. I mean, it's gambling. You know what I mean? Like, you never know. Like, most people go through their entire life and never have anything like what happened to me. Mm-hmm. Thank God. So the fact that everyone should carry a gun around for the slight chance that they could be in a scenario like that is just, it's living in fear and asking, it's ridiculous. Like, even in my situation, I would, having had my experience, I would never do that. I think it's just idiotic. And who wants to live with that, in that sort of world? I mean, that's a whole other argument, but anyway. Yeah,
no, I've got you. I felt like it'd be appropriate to ask.
No, and it makes sense.
What happened next?
Well, he forced me into the back seat and told me to take my clothes off. And at that point, then it was like a shot of reality. And so I started to defend myself and jump back in and, was hitting him, not like I said, not very hard, and when I got the corkscrew out of his hand, he was furious, and he got it back immediately. I've hit him a few times, but like I said, I don't know if I broke if I broke the skin or anything. I definitely did not hurt him badly enough to do anything. Okay. He basically got it back and just pummeled me. It was horrific. And just was punching me in the face, throwing me around. Eventually he threw me he was basically trying to get me back into that back seat. So he threw me back, and I remember two distinctive snaps or cracks in my body, and my back hit the back of the bench seat as he threw me back. And then it's like I said, it's a Suburban. So it's got these huge buckets, sort of bucket containers on the side, at the windows, mm-hmm. where kids like their toys and stuff. Yeah. At least that's what this car would, Mm-hmm. So when he threw me back, he then shoved me further back so that I'm basically lying, across the bench, and threw me so that my head swung back, and my neck hit the edge of the plastic container, and then my head just kept going into it. So my neck just snapped. There was like this loud crack. So I knew for years I had a worse injury than had doctors discovered. But it took 4 years to find that one out. But anyway, so in the moment, so then he basically, he was beating me so severely. And there was this one moment actually where I was very conscious that I needed to submit to what was happening, or I could get killed. And what happened, he had punched me in the face. I don't know if it was my lip that split or in my eye, but my head went spinning around, and I just saw almost in slow motion as it was happening, my blood like following me in this sort of spin around. As my head flipped around, it was just blood following me. And at that moment when I saw the blood, it was sort of a moment of understanding that this is going to be no more dangerous if I continue to fight. And it was the middle of August. So it was really hot. Like I remember even saying to him, like, I couldn't breathe. It was so just in the, it's like all of a sudden like going into a full on sprint in a closed hot vehicle. It was just like I couldn't breathe, and it was ridiculous. And I kind of just left on in like the spirit, my like sort of spiritual self or whatever. I kind of just checked out and realized like, okay, if I need to survive, I need to think about this and figure this out. So while he raped me, and he continued beating me throughout I had my hands over my face because he didn't want me looking at him. So he punched me constantly in the face through the entire time that he raped me. And I can't go into, I shouldn't even go into no. Anyway, but the case is still, he's in jail right now, and we're waiting trial, which is a whole other story. But I shouldn't go into too many details just because I'm not supposed to talk about, I don't know. It enrages me, honestly, because the fact that I could be honest about what happened to me and speak publicly could affect my case negatively pisses me off beyond belief. So he continued to beat me and rape me while I basically just kind of checked out. That was when I started, had my one hand behind me every once in a while. I had one hand on my face. I think I had one hand behind me doing the sort of like hand, like trying to do weird sort of hand motions behind my head. Just something that would look weird and catch someone's eye, or like writing things on the window.
And no one caught this.
No. And like, unless they just didn't care, which I don't know why I laugh at that, but I've always wondered, and who knows, someone could have even thought it was consensual sex. You know what I mean? That's just like, there's so many disgusting thoughts that have gone through my head over the years, wondering, if anyone else saw what was going on. And if they did they know it was violent? Did they think that they were witnessing something consensual and just didn't want to, and like that was uncomfortable? Who knows, but I'll never know. But anyway, so he finished, and then his demeanor changed completely. This part was so weird, but it also was what saved me. He told me almost immediately that he shouldn't have done what he did, but that my husband told him to do it. Now, I've never been married. I certainly wasn't married at the time, was not even engaged, but this is what he said to me. And so immediately I began going along with it. Oh. And my immediate impulse was that, and it's so funny because I remember at one point I wasn't even looking at him. I was kind of looking at the seat. I was still in the back seat, and he's talking, and I'm looking at the seat thinking like, oh my God, all the years that I've trained as an actor, they've all led up to this performance I'm about to do right now. But basically he said to me, oh, your husband told me to do this. And I was like, what? He did? And he said, you're married, right? And I said, well, we're engaged. I don't know why. I said, yeah, did I say that? Anyway, that's funny that I don't remember that exactly now. Anyhow, I'm pretty sure I said, well, we're engaged. Yes. And, he said, yeah, well, he wants people to think that you had an affair. And so he told me to do this. And so I said, then I just began like getting angry, and I was just like, oh my God, he's such an asshole. You know what? This isn't your fault. This is so typical of him. I can't believe that he did this. You know, he shouldn't have involved you in this. It's so awful. You know what? It's not your fault. This is him. And, I just kind of went in this whole sort of monologue about, my asshole husband.
So the
guy, I'll never forget the moment. He like is looking at me and he goes, "Oh, wow. I shouldn't have done that. You're cool."
Oh my God.
So it was the most surreal moment. You're just, like, I've just been brutally raped. I'm bleeding. I'm like, God knows what I looked like in that moment. And here's this guy telling me I'm cool, and feels like we're having this like personal, like private moment of, it was very, very odd. But anyway, so then he started like wrestling around and like looking for stuff to steal at that moment. And I explained to him it wasn't my car, that I worked for the people, that I was like minimizing my professional, my sense of professionalism as much as possible. I said I was a housekeeper, that I worked for rich people, that I didn't have any money myself. I was trying to get myself, I was trying to draw a parallel between us as much as possible. And then eventually I think he realized that there were people walking around, and we were in the middle of Brentwood. Mm-hmm. So he jumped into the front seat. He still had the keys, or he grabbed them for wherever he had put them. And he said, "Okay, we're going to go for a drive." And at that moment, when he started the car, I knew that if I didn't get out of that car, he was going to kill me. I just knew it. Wow. I'll never be able to prove that. There's no way I could. But I have always known in my heart that if I didn't get out of that car, he was going to kill me. And it's always been my belief that there are other victims of this guy, because anyway. So anyhow, finally the Suburban had like its benefits, but so it was, because it was so big, there was no way for him to hold me in the back seat and, drive a car at the same time, and it was so big, he couldn't even, so I immediately jumped back into the middle seat where the back doors were. And it was odd, because I feel like I was in such a clear state of mind, like when we were having that whole conversation about the husband and whatever. But from that until him jumping in the front, when he jumped in the front seat, it was just like panic and just hysterics again. Not anything vocal, but just in my mind. Like, I remember I didn't know how doors worked. Like, I remember just pressing buttons like a child. Like a baby just kind of goes whack, whack, whack. You know what I mean? It was very infant-like. Mm-hmm. But I was just like, I had to get out of the car, and I didn't know what buttons. I didn't know how the car worked. The door was locked. I think I tried the door. I had already tried the door to escape the first time before the rape, or at least anyway. So I'm just pressing buttons, and one of the buttons happened to open the window. Thank God the windows weren't locked. And this is what I don't remember, is that because they're childproof windows, right? So they don't go down that much. Mm-hmm. So, and I was small, I was always a pretty skinny person. So I guess I fit through. So I don't know. I don't remember like the dive move out of the window, mm-hmm. but he was like backing out of the, he was trying to get out of the parking lot, and I just dove out the window.
While he was driving.
Yeah, he was backing out of the parking spot, and like driving like an insane person. And so I jumped out, and he immediately, I don't know if he braked. I don't know if he braked, or it just felt like he did. Like it was just a slow motion moment. But I remember I jumped out of the window, and then this is the weird thing. I tried to open the passenger door because I wanted to get my bag.
Yeah.
It wasn't rational. It wasn't conscious. Like there wasn't a conscious like, oh, better not forget my bag. It was just reflex. Like I jump out of the window, and instead of immediately running away, I try to open the door. And I remember there's this moment of the two of us just looking at each other, and he's looking at me like, oh my God, you crazy bitch, what are you doing? And he yelled at me like, go or no. I don't know what he said. But all of a sudden, like the door was locked. And I realized that when I tried the front door. And then I realized like, what the fuck are you doing, Jane? Get out of here. And so then I ran, I ran like this huge circle around the front of the car because I was so afraid he was going to try and run me over at that point. So he then continued to back up. I did this big circle around the front of the car and then ran to the entrance of Ralph's. And I remember there was an old man driving past. I had to like run in front of his car, and I stopped, and I don't know what he thought or if he ever stopped or whatever. But then I ran into Ralph's, and immediately I went into the there's like a little information area right in the front. And I just ran in there, and there was a manager or someone was there, and I said, I just got raped in your parking lot. We need to call the police. So he got on the phone and called the police, and then I picked up the phone right next to him. There were two different phones, and I started dialing because I needed to call my boss because I didn't know what the license plate was of the car, and I didn't want him to get away with the car. I was already terrified that my purse was in the car with my name and all that. It's like I didn't want him to find out who I was and where I lived and all that.
Oh, wow.
And that was a really weird. I don't know what the hell was wrong with their phones, but I guess it's because they're all on open lines. Mm-hmm. So somehow my pushing buttons on my phone was affecting the other guy trying to call the police, and he's like, don't do that. So then I started like yelling at random people that were in the grocery store, and I was like, somebody have a cell phone I can use? I need to use someone's cell phone. And people, Glenn, I will never forget this moment either. They just stood there looking at me like I was a monkey in the zoo.
I'm not.
No one came to help me.
Quite honestly, I'm not surprised. I think that's the normal reaction from human beings.
I would be me. I would have like.
I'm not. No, I'm not saying you or myself, but I think most people.
It's so odd. Like, it maybe for a split second be in shock, but then at least like get your shit together and be like, oh, this person needs help. Mm-hmm. Don't just stand there staring like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. That was the first of many moments that changed me, having had that happen to me. It wasn't the brutality of the rape was awful, and it was disgusting and horrible. But what hurt me the most through the whole experience, healing from it and all the time since then, is the realization that humanity is way more fucked up than I ever had any idea. And that's what's been hardest for me to process, because I was a very optimistic, big, I have high hopes for humanity. I still do. But it was a big wake up to see that most people do shitty shit, like have very shitty behavior. Mm-hmm. They just don't know how to be a good person, and they don't want to put the effort into trying. Well. But yeah. But anyhow, but I got away.
So this is the first time I hear you talk about I knew what happened, but I never knew the details, and it's kind of sickening to actually hear that story. Fuck. Yeah. So I guess next this opens up a whole fucking new world for you, starting with the police. And so what happened?
Well, the police actually were great at first. The first was what first affected me the worst was those people in the store. Then this one manager at Ralph's, and I've always wanted to go back and find her. Should have before I left LA. But she took me, and I had no shoes on. I had no underwear on. I'm just wearing a skirt and bare feet, and my shirt. Luckily, I still had my shirt on. But I'm walking barefoot, and I looked like Rocky Dennis from Mask. Like I was beaten severely. Oh. And so I'm walking through Ralph's. This nice manager lady took me to some back office, whatever, and then gave me her phone, or let me use the phone there or whatever to call my boss. And I didn't. I guess I didn't call. I had to call. Oh, that's the other thing too. Is I was trying to get a hold of my boss because I was worried about the kids because they had to be picked up at camp, right? Mm-hmm. And when I was being raped, my cell phone was ringing. It was actually I think my boss was calling when it was happening. That was a weird moment too. But anyway, the woman was really nice then. But then they called the ambulance, and the ambulance came, and the two people in the ambulance just talked over top of me. I have a vague memory of them talking about Survivor.
Oh my God.
Which is really weird. I love the show now. So had I been a Survivor watcher back then, perhaps I would have enjoyed the conversation, but I don't think I would have in that moment.
But I remember are they not trained to deal with these type of situations?
No, they treated me like I was a piece of furniture. They did not say one word to me. I was sobbing hysterically. Like I couldn't stop. Because you're at that point, once you're safe, or at least, have the illusion of safety or whatever, that's when you start to process what happened. Like in the moment, you're really just trying to survive, so you're not really taking note of like what's going on or why it's happening or whatever, because you don't have time for that, and there's only so much your brain can handle. But afterwards, like I was like, why did this happen to me? And I was like crying and I was hysterical. They never once spoke to me. They never once, tried to like, hey, you're okay. You're safe now. Nothing.
So how about the LAPD? How'd that go?
They were actually really nice to me. I didn't meet my actual detective until the next day or a couple days later. It was just like people who were on shift. Okay. And did
they have a therapist there in place? It
happened in Brentwood, right? So, which is the luckiest thing, because in Santa Monica at UCLA is where the Santa Monica Rape Treatment Center is based. Okay. And they have an amazing organization in terms of dealing with rape victims, rape survivors immediately after it happens. So I didn't go through the emergency room. I didn't have to sit and like wait for anyone or like go through with all the other patients. I was taken immediately to the back of the hospital where the rape treatment center is. So it was totally private. I was able to call Joe, because it was funny because I didn't have my cell phone, right? My cell phone had been in the car. And luckily I actually remembered Joe's phone number, because nowadays, like, I don't know anyone's phone number. Who does anymore? It's just in your cell phone, right? But it took me a while to remember his number. I kept dialing the wrong one, and then finally I got through. And so then whatever, they treat, I was treated quite well. At that point, they immediately have an advocate that comes in. But I'll be honest, like, the first thing that started bothering me, and this is probably just very personal to me because I'm not one that likes to be coddled, but the people that worked for the organization, in fact, most people, not so much the doctors and nurses, but anyone that was sort of there on sort of a therapeutic healing level, talked to me like I was a wounded lamb. And like talked to me with like a really soft voice and treated me like a child. You're going to be, and it's like, it bothered me from day one. And it continued on every time I met with therapists and like was trying to, I'm not that kind of person. I don't like to be, I don't like women who talk with baby talk. I don't like, I don't like to be treated like a child. I don't think I like to be treated as a child, even when I was a child. So it bothered me. It bothered me that I was not being treated as an adult just because I had been hurt. Like, it was a very weird thing psychologically, like to feel like you're being patronized when you go through something horrific. It's hard to explain because it's one thing I haven't met too many people that have had that same complaint. When I've told other survivors that I've met, they know what I'm talking about immediately, but I've never heard anyone have that complaint themselves.
Like you said, though, that sounds like it is a personal thing, because knowing you're a very strong woman, and how you handle things is different than other, it's an individualized thing. So yeah, that's true. But it did irritate me that people that
it should have been apparent like that. You know, I don't know. I'm the kind of person, I can tune in. I'm pretty intuitive in terms of like what the way people are. Mm-hmm. And if, I don't know, I have enough awareness like that if I'm talking to someone and they are really like a quiet, timid sort of person, like I feel like I'm being loud if I'm overbearing, or the opposite. Like if I'm with someone who's more overbearing than me, I feel it. So it's like, maybe that's me again, but it's just odd to me that you don't change your behavior if it's not working with someone, mm-hmm. you know? But anyway, whatever. That's a small complaint, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you touched upon something on that, though. Like you said, mm-hmm. you were lucky that it happened in a certain area. What happens to someone who gets attacked in a small town, let's say, that doesn't have this infrastructure in place to deal with people who get attacked like this?
Well, it doesn't have to be a small town. I have a friend who was raped and was sent. Her attack was equally, in fact, is in my terms, more brutal than mine. She was thrown out of a moving vehicle. When she was brought to Cedars, they didn't even give her a rape kit. I mean, they didn't even believe that Glenn, honestly, I don't know, because it hasn't been my experience. I was fortunate to not have to deal with the things that other people deal with. But sometimes, I mean, whether it's a small town, whether it's Beverly Hills, you know, it depends on the people that are working that night and what they do. If they don't believe you, I mean, I don't know why it's anyone's business at a hospital not to believe that something happened. Mm-hmm. There should be protocol in place that you just do certain things. You call the police, you get nurses ready to do a rape kit. Okay,
so wait a minute. So what is a rape kit? I have no idea. I think I might know, but
well, it's basically it's essentially the whole prep for of getting forensics ready for the police and for your case.
Good God! So this happens immediately after?
Well, I mean, time goes by. I mean, you're not ushered right in and like they don't immediately, start swabbing you. Mm-hmm. But because I actually don't think it happened. I was done. I was raped at 3:30 in the afternoon. I got out of the hospital around just after midnight. Jeez. So I was at the hospital probably, about 8 hours. It's a lot of sitting around. I don't remember a lot of it, honestly. Like those 8 hours went by. I mean, in the moment, it took forever. But now thinking back, I have no idea. I mean, my boyfriend arrived. My boss was there the entire night. The entire night. She waited there. She didn't have to be there. Mm-hmm. She was amazing. I mean, I didn't even see her really. She just sat in the waiting room. Mm-hmm. And waited for, just wanting to make sure that I was taken care of. And I was there. My boyfriend at the time, Joe, spent more time talking to her because they were just sitting around waiting. But, I basically was questioned by the police. You give your first initial, story of what happened. They ask you, exactly where it happened. And they had also, what I found out once I got there is the guy, once he peeled off out of the parking lot, he was driving so erratically that a fire department person he just happened to cut off a fire department guy when he turned. And this is interesting. And I've never met these people, so I've never heard anything except for what random, people at the hospital or something told me at the time. So I don't know exactly what happened. I won't find out until everything's over, because, again, you're not allowed to talk to anyone about this stuff, and you can't meet the other witnesses. There are witnesses somewhere. I have no idea who saw what or what happened. Mm-hmm. But so anyway, this fire department person put his, as far as I know, he put his siren on, and which is odd because he wasn't a fire person. He wasn't a cop. And I guess the guy got freaked out and took off. And this fire department person followed him. And he just had a feeling that something was wrong, and so he took off. He made this big circle and then went back into another entrance of the parking lot, and then took off down the alley that's parallel to Wilshire. And then he almost immediately crashed into a post. Wow. And then jumped out of the car and took off. So and I know that his shirt was found, and they know it was his shirt because there was video surveillance. Although nothing good, like the video surveillance at Ralph's basically shows him from like the shoulders down. Like the sun was so bright that you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see anyone's faces, but they knew it was him because of the shirt, because they found it. They found it with my blood on it in the alley. He had ditched it.
Wow. Okay.
So he got away, and but they got they got the car, and he never got my purse or any of that stuff. So he never knew who I was, which is great. That was a huge. My life would have been much worse if he had gotten my wallet, because I always would have been afraid that he knew who I was and that he could find me.
So you just mentioned now that this is still in the courts. This happened over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So what the hell's gone on between then?
Well, what do you mean?
Like,
you mean in terms?
It's 10 years have gone by. So where is this guy? So did he get caught? Or like?
Yeah, he got caught. This is the funny thing, Wilson. I finally have the balls to get the fuck out of LA because my life was a disaster. So I decide to move to Vancouver. I arrive in Vancouver, finally ready to like leave that shit behind me because I was tied to it.
This is when?
This was in 2011. This is in the end of November 2011.
Okay, so eight years after the event.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so eight years later, I was just like, I'd been going in circles, basically. Never got my life back together, really. Never really, wasn't able to really work, it's hard to explain because people who knew me during that period may not have even known that I had this stuff happen to me, because I kind of lived this like illusion of a life.
Yeah, like Jane, I didn't know. I think I didn't know until 2 years after the event. I think Todd, a mutual friend of ours, told me about it.
Right.
And that's how I found out. And I was. But
didn't you know? Because it happened in 2003. So if I saw you.
Nope, I didn't know.
You didn't know then?
Didn't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh,
I didn't know until 2 years afterwards.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, I kind of remember talking to you on Facebook about it. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because I post stuff publicly on Facebook.
But Todd had told me about it, and I believe that's how I found out. I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
but you at the time you had never told me. You had never said anything about it.
Well, if you left in 2003, I wasn't. You and I weren't close enough that I would have told you. I told like my best friends at the time, and I told my boyfriend to tell everyone who was in our circle of friends because I knew I was going to be a disaster.
Yeah, we saw saw each other casually at dinners and stuff like once every couple months or so. So
right, yeah. No, I wouldn't have brought it up, especially like I was kind of trying. For me, it was weird. Like I wanted everyone to know, but then I wanted people to know because I wanted them to know, but. No, I guess I did want to talk. Well, I don't know. Honestly, it was so weird. It was like it's such a weird frame of mind when you're recovering from trauma because.
Well, let me ask you that. Are you embarrassed or mad or all like what's going on? And how long does it take you to get out of there? And did you go to therapy to help you get out of this? And yeah,
I got a therapist immediately. I knew. I've always been. Although I don't think I'd ever really been in therapy too much before that. No, I guess I had a bit, but I knew I needed a therapist, and that's another thing that the Rape Crisis Center, the Santa Monica Rape Treatment Center, provides is you're allowed counseling. Now you're only allowed a certain amount, obviously, because they don't have endless funds. But I met with a counselor there. Who, and the first thing she said, she basically, she explained to me what post-traumatic stress disorder was, which I think is a disservice. I'll say that because, and this is one thing I've spoken with later with my psychiatrist that I had in Vancouver, who doesn't believe in PTSD, which is a bit of an extreme point of view that I don't agree with. But he believes that it's being overdiagnosed now, and that what happens that doctors basically tell people, well, this is what you have. This is what post-traumatic stress disorder is. and this is what's happening to you. And in some sense, like for me, it was validating because I definitely was experiencing everything. So it was helpful, but it also prolonged it, I think, because it's not a death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's something you can recover from, but they kind of treat it like it's not. And it's certainly not something you fucking recover from with pharmaceuticals, which pisses me off. I mean, that's a whole other thing we could get into. But I was smart enough to know that I needed therapy.
By the way, on that topic, that's a whole other podcast because I can get started on that as well. So,
what, psych drugs? Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't poo-poo it completely because they did save me, and I'm still on antidepressants. I've been off and on them, and I was, when I was off them for a couple years, I kind of derailed a bit. So I know there is some help in them, but I don't think anyone should be on them permanently. I don't think you should be on psych drugs without therapy in addition to it. You sure as hell should not be using those drugs to stabilize yourself after trauma. But anyway, so I interviewed a bunch of, my boss recommended some therapists, and I think I got some recommendations from the counselor that I had met with, and just through different referrals. I met with probably 6 or 7 or maybe even more different therapists, and several of them were very similar to the rape advocate that was at the rape treatment center and talked to me like I was a baby. And so I immediately was like, no, this person is not going to be good. I remember this one woman, she had her office set up like this chair that I sat on was like 6 feet away from her chair. And so we're sitting looking at each other, but like really far away from each other. And then she's whispering. She's like, so can you tell me about what happened? And I was just like, what? Like, it was like a fucking comedy scene. It was ridiculous. And it was like such a parody of itself. I was just like, oh, this is not real. But anyway, so if I found someone who was more direct and whatever. And yeah, I don't have a therapist now since I just moved, but I've pretty much been in therapy like almost constantly. Once, there's so much to go into.
I know, but it's what I'm looking at this as it's a 10-15 minute event in your life that changes your life forever.
Well, 30 or 40 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
changes your life forever.
Yeah, I know exactly. I was just thinking about that the other day. It's so weird. Like in those same 30 or 40 minutes, I could have just watched an episode of Seinfeld. You know what I mean? Which affected me just as deeply. Right. But in a different level, in a different way.
So, yeah. But it's amazing that you're a strong person who's been able to somehow survive, but it's affected you like this.
Yeah,
but
I mean, you say that, but it's been 10 years,
I know.
Glenn,
that's right.
and still, it's like people say that because they see that, like they hear this, and it's just words. You know what I mean? It's like your life is really about your behavior. It's like and I'm able to be strong. I don't know if it's my acting training, if it's my
your character, your
new age training. I don't know what it is, but I'm able to be strong when I need to be strong. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that I'm strong all the time. It doesn't mean that I'm not like, sitting in my new house going, what the fuck am I doing? Like I'm by myself. Yeah. Oh no. Am I a normal person? Am I broken? Am I healed? Am I ever going to seem normal? Like, am I fooling everyone well enough? And I don't think so much about that now, but that was a constant, like for 8 years, like when I left for Vancouver, things did change a lot, but for pretty much those 8 years, I felt like my life was a complete facade, like a complete lie. And what's funny is that when I was going through, and I know this is, I don't even want to go into this too much, but because I was working at the time I was raped, I was going through a work comp case. Because, of course, the insurance company, like any insurance company does, once there's a file claimed, that's going to be a lot of money. Like I had a lot of physical and psychological damage. There was a lot of medical bills to pay for, and I couldn't work for a long time. So, of course, they fought it. And the sort of like pinhead move of the their defense attorney was to basically accuse me of being like, he even said straight to my face one day in a deposition that, you know, I like broke down and was like crying hysterically, and we had to stop the deposition. And I can't remember what happened. I had given him the finger or something because he said something awful. I can't remember, but he basically said to my face in the deposition, you know, while on the record, that because I'm an actor and because I had trained as an actor for so long, that there was no way to ever trust anything I said, because it's possible that at every moment I was just in a performance.
Wow.
I couldn't, oh my God, I still, like, as I'm saying that, it fucking enrages me. Because it's so ridiculous. Like, the fact that people think that actors are just liars, I never even thought of that. You know, I've been an actor all my life, but it's an art form. You know what I mean? It's like, people don't go around accusing painters of, like, I don't know what you would accuse that. You know, it's like, but anyway. So I was fighting, you know, even though it was, I mean, I met the chief of police of LAPD at a fundraiser. I got very public and very outspoken almost immediately, mainly because this is a whole other thing. But I felt like I was really exploited by the Santa Monica Rape Treatment Center. I wasn't. They asked me to speak at a fundraiser and to be sort of their rape survivor poster child this year.
Okay.
And of course they did not, they did not word it that way, obviously. It was, it was a great experience until it was over. And then I felt horribly exploited and no one called me again. It was really horrific. And I've never gone to them and said, or written them a letter and said, this is what you did to me. This is what your behavior made me feel. So I should put it out there that they have no idea that the harm that they caused, because it was too deep for me to really face it while it was happening. I couldn't tell them what they've done. And over time, as I've healed from it, I someday do want to go to them and say, listen, like, I don't know if it would ever change anything, honestly. I think there's very deep problems in most political systems that are set up to help people, because you rely on fundraising. And it's sort of like politics. It is politics. You know what I mean? Like, once you have to answer to people, you're no longer only helping people. You know what I mean? You then have goals that have nothing to do with the people that are healing from rape. You're dealing with satisfying your funders.
Well.
But I did feel that.
So you got victimized multiple times afterward.
Over and over and over and over and over again, and that's why it's like the actual rape itself is so far away from me that I was hurt by everything else. I wouldn't say more, but this is what I always explain to people. I had no expectations of that guy. He was a guy. He was someone that flew into my life and flew out without. I had no idea it was coming. I didn't expect anything of him, so he didn't disappoint me. He didn't let me down as a human being. So many people, whether it was friends, family members, people in established systems that are set up. The only reason they exist is to help people like me and what I experienced, and yet they let me down over and over again. Those people pissed me off and hurt me more than that guy did. That guy, now granted, I'm not saying he didn't hurt me. I'm saying that I don't feel the hurt for me isn't I don't have any anger or feelings directed at him. I've always compared what happened to me to like an earthquake, or maybe a plane crash or a hurricane, where it's like something maybe not a plane crash, because then maybe you have a right to be angry at the airline or the pilot or whatever, depending. But for me, it was more like a tsunami, where it's like you don't get angry at the event. You're not like, oh, that fucking tsunami. Why did all that water have to drown my? It's just you deal with it because something happened, and then you're done. It's over, and then you have to get through it. So I didn't have a lot of like human feelings about him as a human being, because he wasn't a human being to me. He was just an event. But everybody else, that shit hurt, you know, and, you know.
Well, okay, let me ask you, your personal relationships with your parents, with your direct family, with your boyfriend at the time or other boyfriends or whatever, moving forward, how has it affected you in that department?
Oh, well, that has changed a lot. I mean, I would be a liar if I said that I was the same. That's the thing that's changed the most. Well, my boyfriend at the time was great until shit got into, well, it's so hard to explain, Glenn. It's
if you don't want,
I mean, he was there in the way he needed to be. Okay. Honestly, I don't think I could have gotten through it without him. But then 4 years later, what happened for me, like I was this like quote unquote strong woman, speaking publicly, speaking at this fundraiser with like Jennifer Garner and David Schwimmer and like all these famous Hollywood people, and I met Eve Ensler and Jane Fonda and spoke at a fundraiser with that they were a part of, and so I was like this. I was the rape victim poster child, and I kind of wore that proudly for a bit because it held me together. But it was an illusion, it was not coming from a healed place. It was my ideas of it was the theory. So when the reality started to crack, and for me what happened, it took 4 years because it was discovered after my injuries that I had two discs in my neck that were herniated. They thought at first they were herniated. They didn't, but they figured because of my age that I didn't need surgery or whatever, because I guess like if you're a senior citizen, that can be more damaging. I don't really understand it still, but because I was quite young, they were like, okay, well, at some point you might need surgery, but, for now you do this and that, whatever. But I was in a lot of pain. They had me addicted to Vicodin. And I wasn't living, I mean, I know I was an addict. No one else knew. I even told my doctors a couple times, I was like, I'm addicted to this. Like, I cannot function without this stuff. And I don't think that's healthy. I'm not sure why. This is not helping me. It's not taking away the pain. It's just distracting me from it. And I've done drugs in my life. So I know what it's like when you're, when you're looking for, when you take painkillers, they're not doing anything. They're making you high and distracting you from the fact that you're uncomfortable because of pain. They're certainly not fixing or helping anything. But anyway, so I was living, essentially, held together with painkillers and whatever other meds I was on. I basically, I knew I was losing sensation in the left side of my body. And I knew that I'd had nerve damage because it was discovered. I had a nurse practitioner. It was actually worked for the insurance company. She was the first person when she first met me. She said, the left side of your face is different. I think you've got nerve damage. And I didn't even notice that it was there. Oh. And then I realized that I had paralysis in my face. And so I managed to get it back. I saw a dentist who gave me some exercises to do, and I got movement back in my face. And then a couple more years went by, and I saw a different neurologist, and the dentist had used the word Bell's palsy, which was completely wrong because that's caused by a virus, and it's not what I had. And because he put that in his report, the next neurologist I saw said, oh, well, Bell's palsy, that's blah, blah, blah. No, you're fine. Never looked at me, never touched me, whatever. Finally, I saw a neurologist 4 years after the rape, and he saved my life. And because I'm going through the work comp system this whole time, everything takes really long, and everything is like paperwork and they don't pay your doctors, and they don't pay the pharmacy, and they don't pay anything, and everybody's having lawsuits and whatever, and you have to kind of try to just be okay with the fact that everyone's going through hell around you, and everyone's, basically at every moment it's in one way saying we don't give a shit about what happened to you. We don't think this really happened to you. We don't think you're as, bad off as you are. Therefore, we're not taking care of you. Anyway, this neurologist I had MRIs, I'd had CAT scans, I had so many different tests. I don't know what he did different, honestly. He did more than other doctors had done. And he wrote a 40-page report that came out almost immediately. I mean, these things usually take 4 months. Within like a week, he had written this report, and the first 10 pages were all written in caps. It's actually pretty funny. And he was like, this woman is in urgent need of surgery. And what he discovered is that the discs in my neck had been ruptured. And what was happening is they were pressing on my spinal cord and slowly severing my spinal cord. Oh. So had I been in a fender bender or fallen over really badly, or something could have happened to me, if I had had more damage to my neck, I would have been paralyzed for life. So I had surgery to fix. I had a disc fusion, and that was fixed. And at that point, when I had that surgery, I don't know what happened, and it opened up everything. And that's when Joe and I split up. I moved out on my own.
Now, how about your parents? How'd they react to this?
My parents are a whole weird thing. My mom, well, I don't know. My dad,
listen, as a dad, like I'm a dad to a young girl, right? She's 6.
Right.
Had she been attacked, or if she ever got attacked, I'd want to fucking kill whoever did it. That would have been my reaction. But also, you have a defense mechanism that kicks into your brain, and just the very thought of it, like listening to your story today, kind of freaks me out as a dad. I'll be honest with you. Like I hear this and I'm like,
well, don't be in fear about it. My
it's
God,
impossible not to.
All you can do is teach her to be a smart person and make sure your friends that have boys teach them. That's the biggest thing that needs to happen right now, is that young boys need to grow up learning like what is right and what is wrong. Yeah. Because somewhere in this world of sex, guys are growing up feeling entitled. And I mean, my situation was obviously very different than a date rape situation, but it's still brutal violence. And I'm not exactly sure how people grow up thinking that this sort of shit is okay.
So here are some of the stats I found online today by Googling up a few things. 300,000 to 1.3 million women a year in the United States are raped. And
wow, that's the most realistic I've ever heard.
Yeah, and so they're not quite sure what that number is because there are so many that go unreported.
Yeah.
And they say roughly 54% of rapes go unreported.
It's probably about right. It makes sense.
Yeah. Apparently pregnancies, 32,000 a year in the United States.
Wait, hang on. That's not physically possible.
So that's a pretty crazy number, huh?
I know. It's yeah. And you think about it in terms of the pregnancy, because that's how it's listed as a statistic, but really that's how many human beings are brought into the world from that circumstance. That's horrifying.
And think of this, this is crazier. In 31 states, rapists can sue for custody and visitation of the child.
Oh, I know. I don't even understand it.
That's absolutely insane. The U.S. is ranked 13th in the world, and apparently Alaska is the worst for sexual assaults, where 37% of women have been sexually assaulted.
Wait, the U.S. is considered 13th in the world in terms of 13th worst
yes.
Instances of rape?
That's right. And chances that a woman in the United States is going to be raped versus getting breast cancer is 2 to 1.
Right. That. I mean, that right there is scary, because your likelihood of getting breast cancer is also quite high.
So the one stat, and then we can go into your case, is the percentage of rapists who are never incarcerated is 97%.
Jesus. Where do they get? How do they get? Does it say how they get to that?
I can send you a link to all the studies and stuff that I was reading.
Okay.
Yeah, 97%. So, I'm not sure what the percentage of those go into the court system, and their agreements or not guilty or whatever for whatever reason, but 97% are never incarcerated. Right. Where does this stand with your case?
Well, before I go into the details of my case, I just want to comment on that. I think what the biggest problem in this is, I'll go into this even further when we get to the end, when I talk about this, just the stuff that I'm working on or things I've worked on since the rape happened. But the biggest problem with the issue of rape is that most women that are raped are in a date rape situation, and I hate that term. Honestly, it's awful, because that the term is used as long as you know the person. Doesn't you don't have to have been on a date with the person whatsoever. It's just basically the term used when women will be in their dorm and get raped by someone they just kind of know who lives down the hall or in the next building or that sort of thing, and that's considered date rape. And it's really difficult to prove because it's one person's word over another. Yeah. And for whatever reason, and this is what I don't understand, and I also don't understand why it's not examined more.
By the way,
everyone knows that rape is wrong after it's happened,
regardless of how it happens.
People who do it seem to think in the moment that what they're doing is right, and you cannot have both. And that's what happened with Kobe Bryant, was that and no one ever talks about this, but he pleaded out, like he settled his civil case that the victim brought against him. Mm-hmm. And what he had to do as part of the settlement is he had to acknowledge that it was likely that he did not get consent from her, and that it was possible that they had sex without her permission. Now, I'm sorry, if that's even remotely possible, then you raped the person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's not a gray line.
He bought himself out.
Well, exactly, and no one ever talks about that, and no one. It's disgusting, but that sort of thing happens all the time, and not just with people who have who are multimillionaires and have the power to, just blacken a woman's name. All these cases with the university kids, or football players, or lacrosse, or all these these athletes in these protected situations where the coaches and the teachers and everyone comes to protect the athletic department because they get all this funding for the school because of the athletic department, and God forbid they tarnish that good name. Good is in quotation marks, but I mean, something needs to happen. That people, it's not right that someone gets to the age of 18, 19, early 20s, whatever, and is gray about where consent is and where it's not. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Even if a woman is unconscious and you and multiple friends decide to have sex with her, I mean, at what point in your life does anyone tell you that that's acceptable behavior? Forget the fact that pretend it's not a crime. Why does anyone think that is okay? And no one ever talks about this stuff in the media. They just talk about it as if multiple people having sex with a 16-year-old, like that's just common occurrence in high schools. It's fucking disgusting.
You're referring to the Steubenville case?
Steubenville, and there's a million other just like it. The other kids, what was it that happened before that? The lacrosse kids, Duke, a couple years before.
I do remember hearing that one. Yeah.
The dancers, the women who had been hired to come or something into the party to entertain them.
Oh, I do remember that one. Yeah.
It's endless. It's endless, and what's also endless is the number of stories that don't make it to mainstream news outlets.
Hey, one of the stats I have is women between the ages of 16 to 24 are 4 times more likely to be date raped than any other age group.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's because there's that space in teenagers to their mid-20s where they don't seem to fucking understand what it is to be a responsible human being. And it's, it's a large part to do with the culture of youth right now. Not even right now. I mean, this has been going on forever. It's just this sort of, there's this void that's been left, just wide open. And I always link it to, and my atheist friends get mad at me because they think that I'm speaking for religion or somehow in a positive way, which I'm not. But I think what happened is when the church and state, when people realized that they really needed to acknowledge that rule. Now, I don't know how this works in Canada or whatever, where that rule isn't, where people don't talk about this stuff endlessly, because there's just as many problems here in Canada as in, maybe not just as many, but it is a huge issue in Canada as it is in the States. But when the church and state separated, and they really not when they separated, but when they started pushing it, and I think they left all the stuff that were once part of religion. Mm-hmm. That the good parts of religion, the good parts of Christianity, the good parts of Judaism or whatever organized religion is taught in a school or is part of a school education, whether it's just the system or whether it's the educational programming or whatever. But a big part of that good stuff is love each other and love your neighbor and do unto others and all the stuff where you teach people to be good human beings. Mm-hmm. Well, that stuff has been left out now and needs to somehow be put back in without the religious connotations. You know what I mean? And I think it's starting in some places, with all this bullying stuff that's going on, and especially in the States, especially with the military rapes that are going on. I think people are starting to realize that there has to be an organized institutional change in learning, in treating each other, that has to happen in order for an institutional change to happen, because it just got worse over the years. You know what I mean? Okay. And it's basic. It's very basic.
I think this is really complex, but look at the advancements of the internet, where a 12-year-old boy has easy access to hardcore porn, something that 20 years ago wasn't happening. Yeah.
That's true too. It's hard for me to understand how that relates, because first of all, I've never been a porn person. Right. So I don't really I don't know what's in porn that is making people do that. I know, having been with, I was with someone who was addicted to, as far in my own, my own 2 cents worth was, I saw him as having had an issue with it, whether it was, officially an addiction or not, but because he grew up in a situation where porn was his first experience, sexual experience.
Wow.
So he was looking at stuff for years that he would never have been able to experience on his own. Long before he had his own sexual experience. And that, I think, is very dangerous, whether you're looking at that at the kind of porn that really is that is, extremely dangerous in terms of how it portrays women in the role in sex,
I mean, that's general. But in general media as well, like if you watch MTV, it's a lot more liberal than it was 20 years ago. If you just movies in general, what kids are exposed to is quite video games. When you've got banging going on, playing Grand Theft Auto, things have changed a hell of a lot in the last 20 years. And,
seeing that kind of stuff makes me sick too. And the problem is that it's there isn't a balance. There isn't there's all these negative examples for people to experience and to, and basically learn from. And there isn't the good stuff. You know what I mean? It's I don't think you can't blame movies. You can't blame video games, but you can blame the people that are responsible for education when they know all that stuff is out there and they're not doing anything to counter it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't take a whole lot just to mention, have one class a year where you just go, okay, hey, I know you're watching these movies and I know you're playing these games and this shit is wrong. Like it's fun and it's good when it's pretend, but I hope, we all have to understand that this is not the way you treat human beings. And, and I think there's a responsibility even there with the filmmakers and the gaming industry of, just saying like, listen, this is entertainment. This is not okay outside of entertainment. And for the large part, I would imagine that most people feel that way. There just isn't the space for it to be heard, and I'm not sure where that, how that can happen or if it does and where it happens. But it's just, it's just so out of balance.
Hey, so where does the case stand right now?
Well, it's still, I've been waiting trial for, getting close to 2 years now, I think. Well over a year anyway. And I can't talk a whole lot about the details because we haven't gone to trial yet, and there's still things being sorted out.
Now, were you the only person he's attacked?
See, again, that's I'm pretty certain that I am, because as far as I know, I am the only defendant in this case. Wait, not defendant. Did I just say defend? I did just.
Yes.
I'm the only victim with this defendant. But they can't really tell me anything. Like they pretty much told me that there's no one else because it would be a different case. I think there are other witnesses, but you're just really not allowed to know anything until it goes to trial, until you testify, and then till everything's finished and there's been a verdict.
So how often are you kept in the loop with what's going on? Like, how does it work? Mm-hmm.
Not often. I mean, it's pretty much my prerogative to be in touch with the district attorney's office and whoever the prosecutor is that's involved. It's gone through like 3 different prosecutors since the guy was first arrested.
Oh. So how did they know? How did they catch him? They were looking. I'm not allowed to know about these things, so I can only sort of assume like what I've gathered. Because the law in California changed a while back, that I believe this is that if you are charged with a felony, and I don't know if it's involving violence or if it's any felony, but if you're charged with a felony, even if you're not convicted, they take your DNA. They take a DNA sample. Oh, I see. So he may have been convicted.
I think that's how he got into the database because. Oh, okay. But he must have had a record as well, because again, now we're getting into areas that I probably shouldn't get too much. I shouldn't talk too much about. But basically, I think, and I don't know for certain, but I think he just popped up in the database one day. They got his DNA from my rape kit, so it was in the databanks forever, for all these years, and then all of a sudden it popped up.
I bet you can't wait for closure in this thing.
Yes,
It's like almost 11 years,
Yeah, and it's tough because I think that I'm moving on, and then I get a call from a district attorney about something or other. I get a call from a detective, or something pops up with the case that just pulls me right back into it, and it's very frustrating and it's very difficult. And I just want it over and behind me, but at the same time, I don't want to take away anything from, I'm not going to be someone who's just going to say, okay, well, I'm done. I don't want to testify. I don't want, I would never in a million years do that. Although I have been very interested for a while now in speaking with the guy that raped me. And I was always told that I couldn't do it until it was over, obviously, because, I'm a witness, as well as, I have to testify. He, I'm sure, would never testify, but he's the one charged. So I can't see him until the trial's over. Mm-hmm. So it's very frustrating because what I want on a personal level is very different from what the justice system wants, or what I want from the process of the justice system. I mean, I would like to sit down and talk with him like a human being and just, ask him why he did it, and not with any judgment, honestly, just really just open myself to the situation and just see if I can communicate with him on a human level and find out, like, listen, what was going on? Why did you do this to me? And, what was going on in your life that led to it, and try and understand a bit of where he was at. And I'd like to be able to forgive him, because I think it would be
Jane, but aren't you opening yourself up though to, if the guy's a complete asshole and just says something, you know what I'm saying here? There was a guy here locally who shot and killed a sports broadcaster about 15 years ago. Uh-huh. And he went to jail. I think he might have been in a psychiatric type of ward, and he was released, and he appeared on the Fifth Estate, which is a national news program this week. Right. And he had no remorse whatsoever for shooting the guy. And this is like 50, and 15 years have gone by. So I guess my concern for you as a friend would be the same. The guy does the same thing to you, and it fucks you up even more.
Well, I wouldn't put myself in that situation. I would feel it out first.
But how could you?
Well, because he has an attorney. He has
let's see. Okay.
He has people that he deals with on a regular basis. I think there's something sort of off with him anyway. I don't think he's that kind of person. And honestly, even if he was, I think I'm strong enough to face that and at least see it for what it is and be able to walk away from it.
This isn't going to be your Jack Ruby moment, is it?
Jack, I didn't know what you said at first. No.
Okay. Okay.
No.
That would be my Jack Ruby moment. I can tell you that.
The opposite. It's interesting. Like when I was talking with the prosecutor the other day, and something that I was thinking about was that it goes back to what I was telling you earlier about when after he raped me and he started going on that weird story about how, I shouldn't have done this. Your husband told me to do it. I shouldn't have done this. You're cool. And, and me going along with this ridiculous story about this, supposed, asshole husband that I have. Mm-hmm. And essentially letting him off psychologically, and telling him that, he's not responsible for what he did. And, that it's okay that he did that, basically me going along with this idiotic facade that he had created. In that moment, I was able to break through whatever fucked up shit was going on in this guy's head. And what's interesting is that normally people think that you're dealing with some beast, subhuman species who is, not like the rest of us, and something is inhuman about them, and that they need to become better and be human beings, when in fact I felt like it was him not being able to see me as being a human being. I think that in whatever weird world he was in, I didn't matter that's why he did what he did. And when he's looking at me, basically just being an irresponsible asshole, trying to place blame or whatever the reasoning was for that weird story he told me. Mm-hmm. But in my going along with it and going and allowing him to be off the hook, so to speak, even though I was just lying, obviously, but in telling him that it was okay, he was able to let down his guard and see me as a real human being and apologize to me. So even in the moment, he told me he wished he hadn't done what he did. So I'm quite certain he would still feel the same way now.
Jane,
that's why I think I held on to that, because I saw that he was a hurt human being. You know what I mean? It's like I don't think of him as being some TV character bad guy.
Jane,
that's not real.
You are
He's just a human being who's fucked up.
You are far more forgiving than I am. Oh man. You're a way better person than I am, because I tell you, if I knew he had done something, let's say to my wife or my daughter, I would probably kill him. And I hate to say it, but I guess that's my personality. But
interesting. Well, I'm not, and you know what? And I'm not from that. That was what I started to say. But I wanted to clarify that because we didn't finish talking about it before. Was about the relationship thing. You were asking me about my mom and my dad, and you talked about what you just said now about that you would want to kill that person. Well, my dad had no reaction, and this is probably why a big part of why I am the way that I am. Now, I don't think this is necessarily positive in his reaction. I told my dad because I was raped on my dad's birthday.
Oh God.
And so I felt really bad when I was in the hospital because I hadn't called. I was dropping the kids off picking the kids up at their camp and then taking them to a tennis class where like some babysitter would have picked them up or something. And at that moment, I would have had time to go do whatever I had to do for work. And I would have been in the car and then I would have called him for his birthday. So I had this whole plan of doing his birthday call and speaking to him and singing to him and whatever. But that never happened because I got raped. And then when I was in the hospital, I was so fucked up that I didn't want to call him from the hospital and pretend that nothing had happened and just wish him a happy birthday. But I also didn't want to tell him what had happened on his birthday because I didn't want to ruin his birthday with my rape, which this is what goes on in my head. So
well, you had a rough day. Like, let's just say.
No, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I called him the next day. And I told him, and he was really uncomfortable with it. But my dad is not an emotional person at all. He's very detached. Mm-hmm. And he didn't really know what to do with it. He was very taken aback and shocked. And I asked to speak to my mom, but I can't remember. She wasn't there. She was I don't know. She wasn't available. So I don't know what I told my dad, but I think I was like, okay, well, you may want to pass this on or whatever, or, have mom call me or whatever. And then I don't think I talked to my mom for like another day or two. Mm-hmm. So when I finally told her, I got her on the phone, assuming that she was, that she had already known. Well, my dad spent the 2 days after I told him, he never told my mother. My mom had no idea.
Wow.
When I told my mom, she was horrified and she started crying, and I couldn't handle hearing my mom cry, so I immediately backpedaled and pretended that the rape wasn't as bad as it was because I needed to make her feel better.
Wow.
So
yeah.
My parents are very different from I think
your dad.
I couldn't afford to look after her. I didn't. And so I just kind of lied almost and made it seem like it was much better than that wasn't nearly as bad as it was because I just couldn't handle having to deal with her emotional whatever with it.
Your dad may have been living in denial there, not knowing how to react to.
Yeah, I think he still does. I mean, he'll talk about it like he's always interested to hear how the case is going or what's happening, and but he doesn't he's certainly not the kind of person that would ever threaten, or he just doesn't. It's not him. The one last thing, I'm totally derailing the conversation and doing
it's fine.
When we were talking,
it's a really crazy story. So
I know it is, and there's so many different elements to it. I know when you said you wanted to talk to me about this, I was like, "There's no way we're going to cover this in an hour." But you were asking me before about, or we were talking about the lawsuit that I was involved in. I was talking about how when I decided to leave Vancouver, it was basically because I had spent so many years living a lie, essentially, that I was pretending for years. I was pretending I was much better than I was, and just kind of going through the motions of life and just trying to keep myself busy and have things going on. But I was wrapped up in this lawsuit. And, having these defense attorneys accuse me of pretending that that nothing, that in fact nothing had happened to me, or it wasn't nearly as bad as I had claimed. And they're claiming that because I was an actor, I was pretending the whole thing. And it was always so ironic that I was being accused of faking it, essentially, because I was faking it on a 24-hour-a-day basis. But they are accusing me of pretending it was worse than it was, when in fact what I was doing every hour of every day for years was pretending that I was better. You know, like I was a disaster. And yet I had to pretend that everything was all right, which is why it slowly started to crumble, because it takes a lot of energy to do that. You know, when you feel like absolute shit and yet you go out and you go to auditions or you know, do a show or you do whatever you're doing, you know, or see your friends, go on vacation, do whatever, go through the motions that you're, you know, of life, when in fact all you want to do is like crawl up into a ball and watch TV 24 hours a day and, you know, lie in the closet and look at the, you know, the wall in the dark, you know. So it's very difficult. So what I was talking about with the lawyer before, when he accused me of being an actor and no one ever knowing what I was doing was real, was even though what he was saying to me was very evil and disgusting, because he was accusing me of faking my reaction to what had happened, when in fact being an actor saved me, because it allowed me to have strength that I didn't actually have. I wasn't pretending to be weak. I was pretending to be strong. And that is very important to me in terms of how I got through the experience that I have, because you've got to fake your way through things sometimes in any situation. And it's not just being a rape victim or a rape survivor. People start jobs and they have to, you know, it's like if you're moving up in a company, you have to believe that that you're the vice president before you're the vice president, or you're never going to become the vice president. You know what I mean?
I'm going to start pretending I'm the janitor soon. I'm not looking to go up. I'm looking to go down and get out. I'm at that stage of my life.
Just go to work in your pajamas. That'll start it off.
I'm borderline there as it is.
Oh God.
So,
but you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
oh, I know.
Like for me, it's like, I'm just not the kind of person. It like goes back to everything I was saying about not liking to be coddled, like by these people who were talking to me like I was a child. I don't like to be vulnerable. I don't like people to see me in a weak situation. So and that's just me and who I am. So all of a sudden I'm raped and all of my control is taken away completely, literally, where I have no control over my body, my situation, the rest of my life to some extent. Everything is taken away in a 30-minute period, and I've got to rebuild it. In some, you've got to fake it till you make it, baby. Right.
Hey, so you were doing stand up. Did you do stand up after the attack?
I did, but it took a while.
And did you incorporate any of this into your act?
I would do 10 minutes on being raped. I loved it. I've got to find. I was actually the subject, Adrian Grenier, or Grenier, or however, I don't know how you pronounce his name. The guy from Entourage. He was producing a documentary in LA, and I submitted some. I can't remember how I got in touch with the producers actually, but they chose me for one of the subjects in this documentary that he was doing on. It was on artists and like why people pursue things for different reasons as artists. Mm-hmm. And so they came around with me for a bit, like at least a couple of months. I think they interviewed me a few times, like we just did stuff like, where they just do like ask, documentaries, it was just documentary style where they just were asking me different questions and they coined the term post-rape Jane. That's what they would always refer to me as post-rape Jane.
Good God. Well, but isn't that weird that...
I probably came up with it first, and they were always really guys, like these two young guys, and they were kind of uncomfortable with it, but I'm just so... I have to joke about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, that's just... I have to, otherwise, like, you're crying, It's like...
My friends and I used to have this term called flipping. So, and what it is if you're having a really bad situation or something bad is going on in your life, you flip it and you make it hilarious. Not to that extent, but, something like stupid, like your car dying or losing your job or whatever. You just flip it and just see the comedy in it. And then it's sort of like a defense mechanism or survival mechanism to get through it.
Well, my life has been one flip after another, pretty much. Do you think, do you ever get to the point where you don't need to anymore and it's just past you and you're done, or this is just part of you for the rest of your life? Where what's done?
This one, the attack. Is this just part of you?
Being post-rape Jane?
Well, yeah. As the years go by, is it further behind you, or is it just...
No. It's different. No, but it's not bad. Like, honestly, it's not good, but I don't know any different now. It's been 10 years, so that's a long time. Mm-hmm. It's weird because it's always it's always right there for me.
Well, let me ask you, is this something you think about every day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, constantly. Yeah, but for me it's very different because I never went back to work, and I was still an actor for the first couple of years, or the first year rather, after it happened. So I was just going to auditions. And
hey, by the way, I finally got to see your appearance on Curb Your Enthusiasm not that long ago. I finally caught up to Curb. I saw your appearance on it, so it was really good.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. That was that was awesome. They cut most of it out, which broke my heart, but what can you do? But the unfortunate thing with that was 2 months before I was raped. And by the time that aired, it was like over a year later, I had been raped and was so fucked up that I wasn't able to, that was sort of my big break or whatever in the industry. And I had a bunch of interest from management, different management companies and agencies, but I wasn't able, I had some great industry referrals, and I just couldn't follow up on it. I couldn't pretend on a professional level. I just couldn't. And I definitely was not doing it stand up again at that point. It was several years. I didn't do stand up again until 2007 or 2008. And it happened in 2003.
Wow. Do you plan to get back on stage?
I don't know. I would never say never about any of that. For me, it's like, I would like to get back on stage, but I'd like to do public speaking. I would like to turn all this, all my experiences, get like a good product, for lack of a better term, like a book. Or, I've been wanting to start this blog, and I have a bunch of stuff written. I'm just, me, I'm a technological moron. Mm-hmm. So I can't, I can't figure out how to get the blog up and running. And so I'm not scared. And the technology of actually doing it when I'm not able to makes me not do it.
Jane,
I'll out there, and
I'll point you in the right direction. All you have to do is ask.
I have plenty of friends that honestly, unless someone literally sits down with me and goes, okay, you showing me how to use Skype yesterday, or at least just telling me, Jane, do this, then do this, push the button, that's what I need.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a blog, someone needs to be sitting down next to me going, okay, so now you need to put this in. What do you want it to be called? Okay, now do you have a font? Do you have what do you want it to look like? Do you have a photo? Okay, this is where you put the photo in. So once I have I'm just I'm a moron when it comes to that sort of thing. I know I'm a particularly bright person in terms of just, who I am, but I am so behind when it comes to technology, and I'm not very good at not knowing things.
Listen,
I just stay stupid, and it's horrible.
You figured out Skype in 5 minutes. I think you can figure this out. I'll point.
I know, it's terrible. What? I put it off for years, literally. You have no idea. So I have one friend who on over the years, every year he does readings for me, and he's this amazing intuitive man, and he's an astrologer, and does also, he's just a very smart guy, and does he records these things for me where he does readings, and he pretty much once a year, I think, over the past few years, he's done one for me. And every time it's okay, well, do you want to do Skype? No, I can't do Skype. I don't know how.
See, okay. Now you can.
Now I know. Now it's oh my God.
So, hey, tell me about the video project.
So I have this idea, and I came up with this, I think it was almost a year ago. I'm the worst at like making things happen, I swear. I used to be such a go-getter in my youth.
Oh, I know you were. Rave queen.
I know. How is it that the years of my life when I was like in nightclubs, going out and doing God knows what until like 9, 10 in the morning, sometimes into the afternoon, barely sleeping, I was the most productive I've ever been. I mean, I was organizing events for thousands of people with a notepad.
Yep.
Like, I had no idea how to use a computer. I literally had like a pad of paper and was like juggling thousands of dollars and doing all kinds of crazy things on my own most of the time. It's crazy. And now I can barely like, oh my God. Anyway.
Well, let me ask you, do you think the attack is part of the reason why you're afraid to move forward? Or is it just age?
There's maybe a little bit of both.
Okay.
No, I think honestly, I would love to be able to like play the rape card all the time and just be like, oh, my life would be perfect if it wasn't for that one thing. But I mean, I've got to have responsibility just as a person in a lot of it. And I think for me, LA was a big part. Like moving to LA and not being able to be in control of how you move forward as an actor. Mm-hmm. Like with, I always did really well through my life in terms of getting work as an actor until, or at least just finding stuff to do or being acknowledged. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to be acknowledged in Los Angeles when there's so many people doing the same thing, and every single person has their own drive. It's like everyone is ambitious and driven and doesn't give a shit about what you're doing.
We have something to relate upon on this because I'm a Hollywood survivor as well when it comes to, my experience was when I was doing the TV show and the TV show got canceled. I had, I had an agent at the time. I had a manager, and I decided, okay, I'll give it a quick shot. And I went to, I think maybe 3 or 4 auditions.
You did?
Oh, yeah,
I never
did.
knew that.
Yeah. I went to some bullshit type of not real estate, but home reno type of shows. Like, hey, Joe.
Oh, to be to be the host.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I went on a couple of those reality show type of hosting gigs, and because of the TV show, I had openings where I was able to do that, and I hated it so much. Right. I remember after the last one, and it was with her, she was such an idiot, and I'll say it here. It was like Abbott and Costello, but Costello's granddaughter, or whatever. She's like a big casting agent in Los Angeles, and I went to one with her, and it was so awful, and she was such an asshole, and one of the. There are a few people on my list of assholes in Hollywood, and she's at the top of it. She's one of, I'd say, like top 2. And after that experience, I remember calling my agent, and I said, you know what? This really sucks. I'm going back to high tech. I'm moving back to Canada. And at the time, my mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and things were going on, in my personal life and stuff. And I decided, you know what? Fuck this. This sucks. Yeah. I never wanted to be a Hollywood guy to begin with. I just kind of ended up there by chance and kind of went for the ride. It was fun while it lasted. And after that, I was like, oh, I've had enough of this shit. I'm moving back and moved on with my life. And now I look back on it like I did have some fun, but there were a lot of nightmares as well. And it's done with. So.
Right. Well, it's nice that you had the ride of the success. I think that's the thing that's always been difficult for me is that I never really got to put myself out there the way that I know I could. So I can't. I still, even though I moved to London, Ontario, for Pete's sake, it's like, so I'm pretty fucking far from Hollywood now,
Yeah, but with the internet,
but there's still something in me that's like, I have something to say. I'm not done. So whether or not it's, it's acting or it's, being the rape victim spokesperson once again, I feel like, I was always driven in this weird way that I liked acting and I wanted to, that was my art form and that's how I wanted to get work. But for me, I didn't like Hollywood. I never did. What I wanted was the success that Hollywood could offer so that I could do what I really wanted, which was to educate people. Mm-hmm. And it's such a weird thing because I hated most of the stuff that I either went out for or had the possibility to go out for because especially commercials. Oh my God. It just seems so silly to, you train your entire life as an artist and then you're selling fucking like antidepressants. I mean, honestly, there's really not a better spokesperson for antidepressants than me, but it was embarrassing. It was just, and not even real, and like print auditions. So it's like, oh my God, they're just taking a photo of my fucking face. And if I'm lucky, that face will represent the latest psych med. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, what am I doing?
It's a truly weird world over there. And you were there for how many years in total? Like 12?
13.
13. Okay, I was there for close to 4. And I got it. After 4, I was like, oh, okay, I'm so over this. This is enough.
Right. Yeah, but see, you got success. Like, you went there because...
Yeah, but Jane, you know what? I got success, kinda. But the whole time I was doing the show... there were so many negative influences involved in doing that show that it really took away from enjoying it. I would say it was actually more fun to do in Canada. And when we moved over to the States, it was fun for about, I'd say 6 months when it first began because it was like,
when you were in New York,
we were in New York, it was a lot of fun. Right. That's when it hit its peak. And after that, it wasn't fun anymore. It stopped being fun.
Well, that's too bad.
Yeah. So success, no one got rich. Well, sorry, I certainly didn't get rich from doing that. I was barely paid. So if you look at it from that point of view too, like, anyways, but I regress.
That's Hollywood for you.
Yeah.
Well,
anyways, I'm so glad that you came on today to talk about this, and I hope I didn't grill you too bad on this.
No, not at all. Oh, wait, no, don't cut me off. Oh. I didn't get to my video.
Oh, yeah. So what are you going to do?
Well, I want to create this, like a video, like an online video campaign that, in a sense, recreates what happened to me. Like write it as a script. In terms of the brutality of the rape. And what I want to do is create somehow I want to collaborate with either another writer or just myself as the writer, but with a director and one other actor who would play the rapist. Obviously, I would like to perform and I'd like to do it myself as an actor, as a tool for healing, as well as I just want to do it. But I want to basically, I want to show the true brutality of what rape is. I want to create a video it's not in any way titillating. It's not something that it's not sexual in any way. I mean, you wouldn't see, I just want it to be brutal. And I want maybe there would be a voiceover, maybe there would be some kind of story to it in terms of explaining, like, this is the reality of rape. And I just I feel like there has to be something out there from a rape survivor's perspective that gets into the conversation of all these idiot politicians who are speaking out about, who don't know a goddamn thing about rape, who don't know anything, who somehow seem to think rape is like an uncomfortable sexual experience, and then what I'd like to do is continue it as a campaign. And I'd like to find other rape survivors who would like to share their story. I don't want to work with anyone else as an actor unless it was someone who was an experienced actor. Ideally, what I just like to do is then get other survivors who would want to share their story, and then the process they would be paired up with. They would create a team. They would be given a team to work with the actors, the writer, and the director, and we would take their story and create out of the event itself find out what the video would be for their event. And I want to find different instances of rape, date rape, just different situations that we have this idea in our heads of what rape is, but we don't ever, even in movies and whatever, sometimes movies show it quite realistically. And in those scenes, usually people just think it's uncomfortable and they don't want to.
I'm thinking about the Jodie Foster movie, which was, I can't recall the name of it, but.
The Accused.
Oh, The Accused, right.
Yeah, and then there was also Monster with Charlize Theron, where at the beginning, before she becomes a serial killer. But again, she becomes a serial killer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it's like, that's the brutality of it, but usually you don't become a serial killer. You know what I mean? Like, lots of women go through that every single day, but they don't become serial killers. They have to figure out how to live with that. And I think that the general population must be forced to look at the brutality, because they've gotten off way too easy by not looking at it. And it makes it very easy for them to put off this, this epidemic. Like, I mean, you look at the stats that you mentioned. I mean, it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. Like, that's a lot of women. Those are all of our mothers. Those are all, those are all the sisters and daughters and all the, the wives and all these women in the world who are going through life and having their life derailed and then having to change. I'm not, I'm 10 years into this. I am not the exception. I will never be the same, and I'm not the only one. Like, some people, maybe they're much more successful at getting back to what they were doing, and they just get back to work or they get on track. But most people, their relationships fall apart. They go through trouble with work. They can't deal with human beings as the same way anymore. I mean, it changes you, and there's a long-term effect that no one has ever really. We're not paying attention to it because we don't, it's just, it's never entered the conversation. All these rapes happening with these poor young girls, and half the time, like the Steubenville case, that idiot kid, everyone's feeling so terrible for him because he went to jail. Oh, his life is ruined. Well, now he had those whole, it's like, well, what about the girl?
Yeah. Yeah, that was an insane case to follow. It wasn't one of them released just this week, I think?
Yeah, just recently. And again, it was stressed, like, oh, please respect his privacy, and this poor guy, and wah, wah, wah. And no mention of the victim, no apologies, no, I'm so sorry I put this girl through, whatever. I mean, disgusting. It's not disgusting just because he did that. What's disgusting is we have allowed that behavior to become the norm. To let people to go, that a journalist could basically say on camera how horrible it was that that a young rapist has to go to jail and ruin his, football scholarship or whatever, whatever he doesn't get anymore because he turned into a rapist. The fact that a journalist on camera thinks it's okay to speak that way, thank God people commented on it and said, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. But it still was part of the dialogue. So people still speak that way. Let
me ask you, how did you feel about the role of Anonymous in that whole case?
I don't know a lot about it. I don't understand. I certainly am upset by the fact that that guy's going to jail for more time than the rapists are. Mm-hmm. I think it's amazing. I don't understand what they do. I don't really know who they are or what they do in terms of breaking the law. Like, I don't know if they broke into police records. I don't understand how they found the rapist when the police couldn't. There's
a really great documentary about Anonymous. I'll send it your way. It's worth watching.
I see that. I try not to judge either side. I end up doing it all the time, of course, anyway, because I'm human. But
I think everyone does.
Yeah, exactly. But
by the way, you just mentioned some of the listeners might not know this, but the guy from Anonymous who revealed the information to the police, I believe in the first place, he got charged for more time than the actual rapists.
Yeah.
and he's still in jail, I believe.
Yeah, he's still in jail. He'll be in jail longer than all those guys. It was just the one kid who got off early. I guess he was probably, I did not follow the story. I can't really follow these stories too closely because they make me so angry.
Mm-hmm.
It affects me very personally. I can't help but just feel like it's like I'm in the situation. When the Kobe Bryant thing came out, that was right after I had been raped. And I actually was in touch with the district attorney in Colorado and knew, found out some things about the case that most people didn't know if they only followed the news. And that shit made me so angry. It's just, I mean, it's the way these poor young women are treated. It's horrifying because I understand the point of view when someone's charged with a crime. This came up recently for me with some friends with the Woody Allen thing that's coming out. You know, I'm pretty outspoken about like celebrities who have committed rape and not gone to jail for it and not been indicted for it. I don't give a shit. Like when I hear enough from the victim and it's not just whitewashed by some journalist, if I read what the victim has read, or if I know something from being, inside the sort of, once you're a rape survivor, you kind of, you speak with people that are advocates, or you get to know people who know things that other people don't. So if I know something and I trust it, I tend to I will go with that. Whether there's a case, I don't give a shit about the justice system. For me, I have to just look at the position of the victims because that's where I was. That's what I relate to. And I know that if somebody is accused of a crime and they have not been found guilty, no, they don't deserve to go to jail just because public opinion thinks they're guilty. But that girl still deserves to be heard. Mm-hmm. She's still a rape victim. This notion that people make this stuff up, and this poor daughter of Woody Allen's who, 20 years ago, was apparently abused, and is still 20 years later affected negatively by it and traumatized by the constant presence of her father on in TV or what, just having a public presence and having never been punished after he did whatever he did to her. I mean, that to me, you don't make that shit up for 20 years. You just don't. And that's what's scary. It's like, who am I to say that he deserves to be in jail? I don't know anything about the legal case, but I know that from what I've heard and what I've read, that she deserves to be heard, and she deserves to be heard by people who choose to work with Woody Allen, because that's wrong. If they're going to work with that, I would want to know. Mm-hmm. If I was going to go to work for someone, I would want to know, is that person a rapist, or has that person done things that I would not be comfortable being affiliated with? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how the world works.
It's funny. I got into an online war with a buddy of mine in Los Angeles who works in the industry. And this is about a couple of years ago. Speaking of Kobe Bryant, he had posted a thing hanging out with my buddy Kobe because they were working on some whatever quote unquote project together. Right. Mm-hmm. And I replied on Twitter to ask him how it feels to be a rapist.
Oh my God.
And we got into like a pretty intense war about it. But I feel the same way as you do, like celebrities.
Well, let me ask you this, though. I bet that guy has never talked to Kobe and gone, hey, I just want to know, like, just tell me, like, you didn't do it, right? And then I can be okay with being your friend.
Of course not. You know how it works there. Everyone.
What did that guy do? That guy will do everything possible to protect Kobe from this imaginary field of attacks, when all he needs to do is go to that person and ask him to his face. Like, hey, did you do this? You can see in the person's eye if he was guilty or not. But no, the guy's a celebrity, and he's the basketball player, and I'd rather be his friend. So I'll put aside my integrity and my responsibility as a human being. I'll put that aside because I want to be friends with an athletic star.
Yeah, you know how it works over there.
I know,
and that's why you're living in London, and that's why I'm living in Ottawa.
I know exactly. Ottawa, London. It's a long way from Melrose.
Yeah, it's a long way from Melrose and 133 and a half Edinburgh, or whatever my address was back in. Yeah. You lived in Marina Del Rey as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was there too for a couple of years. Jane, geez, I don't know what to say. Thank you for doing this today.
Oh yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate you asking me this stuff. Honestly, most people don't. Most people just read my Facebook posts.
Well, and that's what I've been following your story on Facebook for the past while, and that's why I was like, I've got to talk to you. I've been thinking about doing this for a while, and but in the back of my head, I was thinking like, oh, can I do this? Can I pull it off? Like, or am I just going to be so uncomfortable that I won't be able to ask her the questions? But I know you're pretty open about it, and you're also a very strong person, and it's funny. I had a talk with my wife last night about it, and I was like, what should I ask her? And she was like, just you'll be okay. So thank you.
And you were more than okay. I really, honestly, I appreciate it, because I think it's really helpful for people to hear this stuff. And and I'm not just saying, because rape survivors need to know they're not alone. And that, that's true to some extent. I shouldn't have said that in a patronizing voice.
Yeah.
But I think all people need to hear that this shit happens. You know what I mean? And I've known since like the day after I was raped that I'm not your stereotypical, I'm not dealing with this in the stereotypical way. If there is a stereotypical way, like what does that even mean? But I'm able to talk about things very personal parts of what happened to me openly. I think that, in the fact I like to, because it makes me feel like I'm doing something,
Mm-hmm.
Makes me feel like it happened. It didn't happen just for destruction. You know what I mean? Like there can be good that come out of it.
Jane,
so I feel obligated.
One of the reasons I started doing this podcast was to have, 100 years from now, you and I, we're both going to be blown off this planet. We're going to be gone. And I figured, it's a little piece of data that my daughter or my like a grandkid or something like that can go back and listen to great grandfather or whatever, and just see what, instead of looking at photos of a great grandparent, they'll be able to pinpoint and just go, okay, that's what he was like, that guy, the weird looking guy.
Cool.
And this is, it's like my little data file that's going to be put into the world. And
that's very cool. Although it's also might be the 2014 version of like video of like home movies that your kid may never want to listen to.
I'm taking my chances.
Dad wants me to listen to his podcast with the rape victim again.
No,
oh my God.
You know what? If my dad, like I talked to you, my dad is not well. He's in the late stages of dementia. If I could go back to 1953 and listen to a quote unquote podcast that he was doing with some buddies talking about shit, I would listen to them all, because I would find it.
You know what? You're absolutely right. It's funny because now you're at that point. I have so many regrets of not spending, because my mom passed away about 7-8 years ago, and I wasn't mature enough to have gotten to a point in my life where I really realized that she was a person besides just being my mom. Mm-hmm. I never really acknowledged that she had a whole life outside of being a parent, mm-hmm. and outside of just being my mother. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that there's so many things that I would love to know about her now. So you're absolutely right. That's very cool.
It
might be a while, but yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Or maybe I'm full of shit, and this is,
maybe.
Maybe one person hears this and it's a story that they can go with, and it helps them in their life or whatever. You never know. When you put something out on the internet, you really never know where it can go.
Right.
So,
or the internet could go the way of the 8-track. God, what if that happened?
Yeah, but like next week when I put this out, or this week, someone might hear it and they might pass it on. I'm always surprised at how these things get around, and they might pass it on to someone who they know is a victim.
Right.
Or was a victim, and it helps them in their healing process, and hearing your story maybe helps them out.
That would be good. And I hope no one's ever offended by the fact that I crack jokes endlessly. I can't help it. I just can't.
You know what? Everyone has their own way of dealing with shit. And and you've done a hell of a job coping with this.
Well, Oh, thanks, Glenn. I appreciate that.
Well, Miss Piper, I would love to have you on another day where we're just talking
Talk
about
for another 3 hours.
bullshit and not.
Maybe you can talk about being visited by an alien next time.
Oh God.
just for a different direction.
Did you hear that story this week about the? I think it was north of Montreal and the Laurentians, where a reporter took pictures of what they think is a UFO in the sky. I guess some people around there have been seeing UFOs for a while, and there was I don't know if he was with AP or CP, and he actually took pictures of it. Look for it online.
What does it look like? Did you see it?
It's just like 3 lights. It's very far in the distance, but they've been talking about this for a long time, that they see lights in the sky, and people are like, "You're nuts!" And apparently the reporter was actually there. Well, who knows? It's probably some kind of northern testing.
We would probably be really happy to know it was a UFO. In fact, instead, it's the American government or the Canadian government, God forbid, doing God knows what.
It's probably some kind of drone testing or what have you.
Exactly.
In a northern climate, because it's minus 30 and they can figure it out. But anyways, look for it. It's kind of cool.
Okay, I will.
Speaking of UFOs,
is that all still? Is this still? Are you still doing? Are you still doing the thing? The show? Still it?
This is still recording, but this is it. This is how we say goodbye.
That's really professional of me. Sorry.
Stay strong, kiddo.
Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate you doing all this. I think I really appreciate you allowing me to speak about this stuff.
Bye.
Take care.
Okay.
Desert Humplik.com presentation.